Okay, so this is my watercolor paper, and as I told you, you can use a watercolor paper or a mixed media paper. It will change the texture, but our focus is on colors and not on texture. Let's start with a pencil to trace a sort of like a circle. Doesn't have to be perfect. We are doing a flower. We have deconstructed the color wheel and turned into a beautiful flower, so everybody can learn better. Now we're gonna set the first three petals, sorry, one for our red, which is our primary, one for our blue, and one for our yellow. Now, because we know that the three primary colors will give us the three secondary colors, we're going to set the secondary colors. And you can change a little bit the size or the shape of the petal. I will make it just like that, a little thinner, more irregular. We want some variety. This is gonna be our purple. This is going to be the place for the orange. And this is going to be the place for the green. Now, we know that by mixing the primary with the secondary, we are gonna have our tertiary colors. So let's go on and finish this beautiful flower with the petals that will take the place for, our tertiary. We have dark orange, light orange, lime green, sorry, blue green, blue violet, and red violet. Now we know that we have enough space for all the colors that we need to paint, and we are going to start to paint with watercolors. We're going to proceed in order, and I suggest you please to do the same so we can better learn. So we're going to start by setting the primary, red. You're going to pick a little bit of red, and if you do not have watercolors available, you can do this practice with markers, alcohol marker or whatever. Definitely the watercolor, because of the nature that we can blend them and mix them very well, is going to be extremely effective for you to understand how these colors interact, blend, mix. We're going to make it nice and bright. And for me, it was a little too light. So I'm gonna dark it up with a darker color just because in my watercolor palette, the red, the fire red, looks to me more like a dark orange. And I wanna make sure that we notice the difference between a dark orange and the red. We're gonna let it set, rinse your brush into the water, and let's go and paint our yellow. Let's make our yellow first. Sometimes with watercolors, you need to go a couple of times, water, colors, then again water, and then colors, until you have the nice creamy texture that you need. And then very gently, we are going to spread our beautiful bright yellow in this petal. This is a beautiful way to introduce a watercolor to beginner and students. Like if you have them young student, if you have them paint the traditional circles with all that, this is what we do like later on, right? For my older students, for example, painting students, but for young students, they still feel that they are painting a flower. Sometimes I introduce George O'Keeffe with that, but still we are going to actually learn about the colors and the color wheel and its theory. Now we're gonna set our blue. There might be some variation in my color wheel and yours because depend of the nature of the colors. Some palettes, some brand feature a darker blue, some other a lighter blue. It doesn't really matter, right? If you follow along the steps, you will still be able to understand what is what are primary colors, which are the ones that we are just painting, and what are secondary colors, and now we can create our textures. Tertiary colors. I was so happy when I got a couple of comments on YouTube because this was one of the first video that I did when I started my channel. But the quality of the video was way, way, way below the quality that we have right now, just because I got a better camera, better cell phone, better technology, right? And so now you can actually see this exercise very, very well, and is way easier for you to do it yourself or to teach the exercise to your young kids, homeschool students, or your school, your students if you do not have an art teacher. Now let's start to mix. We're going to mix a little bit of red with a little bit of yellow, and we're going to position our secondary color here, which is our orange. Let's see. And in the palette, even if you have available multiple watercolor, I suggest you to mix the colors, make them yourself. Doesn't matter if they do not come perfect, but it's an experiment, and then the more you will mix them, then the more you will be able to create exactly the orange that you want. Okay, so let's start to create it's like an orange that has 50-50. So 50% of red, 50% of yellow. So it will give us a nice, bright, medium orange. Now let's rinse the brush very, very well. We're gonna set our secondary color. So we're gonna mix yellow with the blue. Now you take some time to clean the yellow by brushing the water as I'm doing it right now. You cannot see because it's out of the camera, but anyway, rinse the watercolor very well. So you go back to your yellow, and then you are going to mix it with the blue. And once again, we want nice, medium, bright green. So 50-50. So if you put a little bit too much blue, you're gonna have a very like a dark green, which we will place in our tertiary. So kind of adjust, touch the paper. If you think that your green is too light, add a little bit of blue. If you think that your green is too dark, mix it again, add a little bit more yellow, and then go over. I'm gonna add a little bit more. And then remember just to rinse off the watercolor. You just use the same technique. You scrub gently with a brush like that with some water. If you need to tap with a little piece of paper, you can do that. So you will have the pure colors again, and you will be able to mix them in the palette or next to the palette. Now we need to mix our blue with the purple. Sorry, with the red. So we're gonna have our purple, our tertiary colors. And once again, over here the same, it should be 50-50, 50% of blue, 50% of red, something nice and balanced. We should have a pretty nice, this is good. Not too warm, which means not too much red, but not too dark, because that will happen later when we will mix our blue with the violet. Okay, a little bit more water, mixing a little bit of blue and a little bit of red, and then I paint. Do not stress yourself or concern yourself too much now if your color bleed outside of the petals, if you see some brush strokes. Remember that this is not the focus of this activity. At the end, it's going to be gorgeous anyway, because we're going to do also outline, labeling, and patterns, which is great. But remember that the focus is for you to mix the color and try your best to follow like my guidance. So when we are mixing half and half, because then we're going to change the way that we mix the color. And it's important that you stay with an open mind, witness this experiment, and see how it goes. I'm gonna dark it up a little bit here because I'm afraid that otherwise it's going to be too pale compared to the other two purples that we have to create. Now, let's keep going. Now we have set red, yellow, and blue, the three primary. Mixing these two will give us orange, mixing these two will give us green, mixing these two will give us violet. Now, what if we mix red with the orange? Okay? You are going to have probably a darker orange. And the more red, I'm going to mix a little bit of red with a little bit of orange, a little bit of red again, and a little bit of orange. And then I try. If I think that it's still, I think that I got it pretty good because it's lighter than the red and darker than the orange. If you need to make adjustment, remember, you can make adjustment. Just go back to the palette, mix, maybe add a little bit more of orange or a little bit more of red according to what is the corrections that you want to, and do it. If you're not sure, let it set and let it dry, and then you can make correction once the palette is dry. You must be able, the goal is for you, and it might not happen at the very first time that you painted the color wheel. Please be patient and be kind with yourself because it's not easy, okay? Art is not easy. You just want to make sure that you can see the difference between these three colors. If they look alike, means that there are some adjustment that you have to make. And maybe you have the very good orange and a very good dark orange and you need to dark up a little bit your red. Or maybe the opposite, you will figure it out. Sometimes you will have to paint more than once, totally fine. Repetition make it, I don't want to say perfect because we don't care about perfection, but make it's better because the more you practice, the more fluent you will be in this language of colors. Now we have to mix our orange with our yellow because we want to have a very light orange. So let's see. I'm gonna mix my orange with yellow. Ooh. And make it as light as possible. Let's see if it's light enough. Maybe it would be not too light, so I need to add a little bit more yellow. Water, more yellow, and now I think that it's better. I'm gonna spread it. Oh yes, I can see the difference between these two orange. I have a mid tone orange and then this one is definitely lighter and warmer because I'm adding yellow on it. Go back and off we go. And we let it set and dry and see. I can still see the visual difference between 1, 2, 3, and 4, totally fine. Also, as we go on, I'm gonna show you that complementary colors are the opposite, they sit opposite on the color wheel. So you will have the red and the green, right? Then you will have the yellow and the violet. Then you will have the blue and the orange. These are complementary colors. And they create a beautiful visual contrast. The colors that sit next to each other, such as dark orange, orange, light orange, or yellow, light orange and orange, or red, dark orange and so on, they are what we call analogous color because they are under the same umbrella, under the same family, and create a beautiful, beautiful harmony and cohesiveness, right? They do not create a contrast, but they create cohesiveness. So it's important that we learn how to use it. Now, let's mix our yellow with the green. And we need to have a more yellow than green. So our green will look way lighter. Let me see. Yes, way lighter, like the fruit, the lime, right? Lighter and brighter. And this is kind of the ring between the warm side of the color wheel and the cold side of the color wheel. Is a transitional color because it stands, it is green, so technically you would say, well, green is a cold color, but because there is so much yellow, which is instead a very warm color, I feel that this color is in between, is a transitional color. Now we need to do the opposite, and we're going to mix the green with the blue. So we should have a pretty intense kind of, dark green. So let's mix a little bit. Let's see what happened. Nice. It's like a nice, intense turquoise, so blue-green. What deal, whatever you want to call it. We're going to call it blue-green just to help you to remember what are the two colors that you're mixing in order to create this color. A little bit more. It's a little too pale. Oopsie. Forgot to put the blue. Back on. Okay. Nice. Do not add any pressure on the paper. If you think that your brush is too dry, dip it in the water and do it again. Now it's our time to mix the blue and the violet. So we should have dark blue violet. So let's start to do some mixing here and see what happened. Nice. So you should have something that is way darker than the first violet and most of all way colder. So be generous in the blue. Is not more 50-50. I would say there is 70 of blue and 30% of violet, right? And we rinse again. And now instead we're gonna mix the violet with the red, and we should have a 70% of red and 30% of violet. So we have our beautiful red violet. Let's see what happens here. So our violet this time should be little, I need a little more red in this. It should be warmer. Yes, better. It should be warmer than this violet. And you can see, you should see the presence of the red. And exactly what we did for this orange, you must see the difference. If you do not see the difference, you need to do some adjustment, which is totally fine. As I say, maybe you can paint the first one, add all the notes that you have to, notes for yourself to paint the second one better. And remember that you can hypothetically shape the color wheel any way you want, as long as you're focused on the correct representation of colors, right? It doesn't have to be a flower. I just feel that the flowers serve our purpose very, very well. So we're gonna color inside, and inside you can choose your favorite color, but I would go with a neutral color. I would go with a gray, just because I don't want to alter, anything. So I would just have my gray center, and that's it. Simple, and it doesn't take, attention from other details. Now we're gonna let it dry a second, and then we're gonna proceed to add all the notes, all the labels, and rediscuss the tint, tones, and shades, so I can explain you what are they. Okay, guys, let's tap and see if it's all dry. And if it's not, still wait. Mine is dry, so we can proceed. So a little bit very quickly, I'm gonna do nice outline just to make it look nice and sharp. And I am going to go over the lines that I traced at the beginning with the pencil. We don't want this line to be really perfect. We want them to be very dynamic, right? Because it's a flower. And also because usually things that are too, perfect, they're not very interesting or stimulating. And when you see that you want to kind of double, you see what I do? Or what I did over here, you can double and make the black be a little, thicker, right? To create a beautiful variation. Oopsie, the purple was not super, super dry, but it's okay. Now, when I did the first original videos, probably was one of the first videos, as I said in the intro, that I recorded, right? Because the colors are very important for artists, right? And for whoever wants to approach art and have fun with art, we need to know the colors and the color theory, how the colors interact with each other, how the color mix, right? And how do we call them? And how can we use them? I remember that I created a beautiful pattern between, like, inside the petals, and at the end I show you what I did, and you're more than welcome to do the same. But if you would like to leave your petals as they are, just to see the color, leave it like that. As I say, this is kind of a dual practice because the product is beautiful. It's a beautiful rainbow flower, and you can even paint the background, so you have a beautiful artwork. At the same time, though, is an important exercise that is based on one of the most important elements of art and design, which is color. And so it's really perfect. I see, like, when I do it in school, my kids love it, and I usually do it with younger kids so they don't feel like the pressure of a more formal practice. that I will do, for example, with my painting students or drawing students, which are already high school students or eighth graders, so they are more mature and they will do the traditional, breaking down the color palette and the traditional color wheel. But I feel that in this way is for me a great opportunity to introduce the element, introduce it properly, but in a fun and colorful way. Now I'm going to use my markers to add the name of the colors. I suggest you to do the same, and you can write them inside the petals, so you can write them around. So let's review, and let's start from our red, which is the primary, our yellow, and our blue, correct? Now let's mix the red and the yellow. We're gonna have our orange. Now this orange is gonna be 50 red, 50 yellow, right? Because it's exactly in the middle. Now we're gonna mix our yellow with the blue, and we have our green. Our green is also 50 and 50. Now we mix the blue and the red, we have our violet. Our violet is 50% red and 50% blue. Now let's proceed to the tertiary. We have red, orange, or dark orange, but I encourage you to call it red orange so it's easy for you to remember. And I would say that is a 70% red and 30% orange. Well, sorry, 30% yellow or 50-50, 50% red or 50% orange. And then we go with a yellow orange. That is gonna be 70% yellow and 30% red, or 50-50. Now we have a yellow-green that is going to be 70% yellow and just only 30% at this point blue, or 50% yellow and 50% green. And blue-green is going to be instead a 70% blue and a 30% yellow, or 50-50. Now we have a blue-violet that is going to be 70% blue and 30% red, or 50-50. And then we have a red-violet that is going to be 70% red and 30% blue, or 50-50, 50% and 50%. In these notes, I refer only to the primary and the way that they will mix, giving us the secondary and then the tertiary. So let's review one more time while we do some patterns. Red, yellow, blue, primary. Orange, green, violet, secondary color. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, red, violet are tertiary colors, right? And depending on the percentage of the primary colors that we will mix, we are going to have all the secondary and all the tertiary colors. So technically, by these three colors, we add the whole color. Thanks to like mixing these three colors, we add the whole color wheel. Now, if we mix the pure color, while I do some nice, beautiful line for a nice pattern, so you can make these flowers look even prettier, I'm gonna tell you what are the tint, what are the shades, the tones, sorry, and what are the shades. So in art, we call colors, we can call them also hue, which is H-U-E, means the pure color. Red, pure color. Now, if we mix the pure color, so the hue with the white, we will have what we call tint, which is a lighter and softer, more pastel version of the pure color. If we mix the pure color with the gray, we will have what we call tones. The tones is like a slightly darker and most of all less vibrant version of the pure color. So if you mix this gray with the red or this gray with the red violet, you will have still like, you will have a tone of the red violet, which is gonna be slightly more than darker. I would say that it's gonna be less vibrant because the gray will turn it off a little bit, turn it down. Now, if we mix instead the pure color, which we say that we call hue, with the black, we will have what we call shades. Shades is the darker version of the pure color. Making shades, learning how, it's extremely important because every time that we are painting or coloring, we want to have a beautiful pattern and alternation between light and dark, between light and shadow, right? And the shadow, as the word suggests, are made on paper by using the shade of the color. So if I'm painting a still life and I need to suggest to the viewer the direction of the light, for example, and so one side of my vase, let's say that we have a vase with flower in, one side of my picture and my vase has to be darker because it doesn't get touched by the light. I will use, and let's say that my vase is blue, okay? I will mix the blue with some black and I will use it for painting or coloring the part of the vase that is not touched by the light. And then I will use instead the pure blue, maybe even the tint with a little bit of white, to paint and color the side of the vase that is instead exposed to the light. So tint, tones, and shades, they are made by mixing the pure hues, so the pure color, with white, tint, with gray, tones, with black, shades. They are extremely important. And now that you know the color wheel and you were able to review a little bit the primary, the secondary, the tertiary, what is what, I suggest you also to use another piece of paper, paint the color wheel like on a line, so all the pure colors, and then try to mix one color at a time, first with white, then with gray, and then with black. And you will be able to see what I'm talking about and the difference between tint, tones, and shade. It's fantastic. And it's also, it will give you so many more options for every time that you want to paint and color. And if you're doing this with your like with your students at school, because you need for them to be able to color an important project and you want them to use a specific color palette, you want them to understand what they are doing, this is a beautiful propedeutic exercise and activity that you can do at the very beginning to make them understand a little better the colors. You can do it because you need to learn and understand better the color, just because it's beautiful, funny, and relaxing. You can do it with your homeschool students. Like, this exercise, it's really, this practice was very successful, and you can now understand why. It's just something beautiful with all the notes. So it's a fancy, a more artistic way to take our notes, right? We are reviewing also a little bit of lines with the patterns. And as I was saying, this is after this exercise, you will have a way better understanding of the colors and the way that they mix it, each other, they blend and they react together. And you will be more intentional when it's time for you to choose the right color palette according to what are the feelings and what are the moods that you want to express, what is the visual contrast or maybe cohesiveness and harmony that you are you want to see in your piece. So if you look the color wheel, once again, we have like a sort of a division, and I would say that the division is sort of like this. And this one is the cold side of the color wheel. So it's the cool or cold. And this one instead is what we call the warm side. These two colors are transitional because it's really, they link the warm side of the color wheel with the cold. It link the warm side with the color wheel with the cold. And these two, look, if I cover here, the feeling that you have by looking at these colors is very, very different by the feelings that you have by looking at this side. This and this is complementary because they sit on the opposite side. These two sit on the opposite side. These two sit on the opposite side, and so on and on, right? You can go and you can have, all the complementary for every single color because you will always have a color that sit on the opposite side. By using complementary color, you will reinforce a beautiful visual contrast and the color will really pop and support each other. By using analogous color, which are the color that sits together next to each other in the color wheel, you create instead a beautiful color cohesiveness in your piece and really great harmony in that. So I hope that you had fun, and I hope that now everything is way clear, like to you, what are the colors and how we can use them. And as I suggest you, keep painting the color wheel, different format, different shapes. Do the exercise by mixing the hue with the white to have your tint, or by mixing the hue plus the gray to have your tone, and mix the hue plus the black to have your shade. And you can do it with every single color in the color wheel. Remember the meaning, hue means colors, so the pure colors, and everything else like white, gray, and black are neutral tones. So there you have it. So thank you so much, and I look forward for another practice together.